us say the Pledge of Allegiance. Or, excuse me, roll call, please.
Claudy.
Here.
Freemeyer.
Here.
Lula.
Here.
O'Boyle. Sunderbrook.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes? So moved. Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimously approved. Fourth, approval of purchase of bi-directional radio amplifier equipment from Raycom Corporation in the amount of $17,843.40. Brian, if you could kind of give us the reason for and the need for, etc.
Yes. I received claims from the city of Davenport, fire and police, mainly police agencies, that they responded to areas of the hotel and were having problems communicating back to the dispatch center via that area. It was reported that they had several problems with that location. We did send radio personnel out. I also went out with a couple of officers because I guess it is a high crime rate area. And we went through the buildings, looked at the train, did call checks and stuff. And some of the problems that the officers were having is we're on the lower line of buildings that were in a ravine area that's a really hilly, trainy area with a lot of trees. And where they were having problems was more specifically indoors and the interior walls of the buildings down there. And looking at that and the mapping, there is an issue with communications in remote areas sometimes. And the only way to really correct this action is to be able to put what we call a bi-directional amplifier in that vicinity, which boosts the decibel gains in that area to be able to cover it effectively for those personnel. I went there with them. I was able to get through with my radio. I, at the same time, did radio checks back with my personnel in my office. I was able to get it through. But some of the more problems that's exacerbated is officers have their radios on their sides, and they have their tasers, their everything, so they're not holding it like I would be or even a firefighter might be. So it's a little bit more difficult for them, and if the signal's a little bit weak, it's just going to exacerbate that a little bit more. And there's another area very near there, another road that's within a couple blocks of there that's also been a little bit problematic. And to improve that area, we would put a bi-directional amplifier.
Yes, Brian. And that is, we've got a certain amount of crime out there. There's a bunch of those apartments. We do get a lot of calls out there. And you're saying essentially our police officers aren't able to communicate as well as they would like to because of their equipment is in a different spot, part of the problem, right?
Yes.
And just, are there any other areas around the county that are going to have similar problems, or?
A few of them that we have addressed, and some of them take time because we have to be able to, when a system goes up, if nobody complains, we're not going to know about it. So when the complaints come in, then we start go through a process to be able to work as quickly to resolve that. And that's what we're trying to do today. There are two other areas that were within the county that we're looking at. One of them has been resolved. That's Lake Kenyatta. We were notified in about February, and as of this time, that problem has been resolved. Whenever we order up the equipment doesn't arrive overnight, and the factories don't keep that kind of stuff on stock. So they build it and then ship it out. So we're kind of at their mercy whenever something is ordered. So Lake Kenyatta, as of last week, that was fixed. Buffalo Shores is the only other area, which is just next to Buffalo. And they're working presently on trying to tweak some of the equipment to get that signal to range over that area, because there is a BDA that was up under the contract that's mounted to a water tower in Buffalo at this present time. Other than that, as far as coverage issues, no other complaints received.
Okay. We got this letter, I think, didn't we, from Lake Kenyatta? Somebody sent us one, but that's covered now, I think, right?
Yes. Is it a letter that I haven't seen? Okay. Yeah. No, it's the Sheriff's Department, and some of the main problems with that is 800 signals have a harder time going through steel structures 800 can go through about 10 to 20 feet of concrete, but steel sometimes presents a problem. So unless your signal gain is high enough out there, you're not going to get through like trailers, mobile homes, and things like that. And that's where the problem is. People can talk outside, but getting in through those trailers was more problematic for them.
So will there be other problems where there are trailer parks around, you think?
Depending, see, that's an area where the signal was low to begin with, low enough to begin with. So if you go inside of a facility, then that just that was enhanced just a little bit more.
The last question, Buffalo Shores, I think that's a combination, that's even outside of Scott County per se, as I recall. Maybe there's a combination, it's pretty far west.
Yes, it is, but I believe it's in Scott County, isn't it?
Yeah, Conservation has their camping there, so I believe that's us.
Yes. Conservation were the ones that made the complaint on that.
Okay,
It's in-
it's Bluebill Ridge or something's further down there. Muscatine, that's right. I'm thinking
Yeah, well,
next to River Patch down there, that is outside the area.
Buffalo Shores gets,
That's where the landing is, I think.
yeah, but that's not necessarily, it's not depth or something that, or,
Some of it has to do along with the river. So when we did the original contract, they pinpointed LeClaire and Buffalo as being problematic areas because when they do their computerized topographical maps that are like in the contract, they're fairly accurate. In the past, when I've done these studies and we've actually went out and drove and then did the computerized RFP signal responses and stuff like that, they're fairly close. Those diagrams that make them take a lot of different things into consideration when they put them out. So the mapping that we have is probably fairly accurate. And you're not going to be able to cover that 100%. If a company, any company, Motorola, Harris, whoever it might be, if they tell you they're going to cover 100%, they'll be spending a lot of money trying to make that happen because I bet you could spend $10 million in this county and still work. You're going to find little areas like you could go into a basement somewhere or you could go into a ravine and that signal just shoots right over the top unless you have 30, 40 towers. You're going to have a few issues. And more so when you start a new system up, it goes through a proving time frame, just like buying a new car. You may uncover some issues. That happens, especially in a new system like this. It's more intricate than a car, of course.
Prior systems, were they also, did they have these little gaps in them?
Every one that I've been in.
I mean, our past communication system.
That I've been at?
Is that,
Yes.
you've had gaps, what percentage, any idea?
Very small. Depends if you were in UHF or VHF. You could lose a UHF signal.
So Bettendorf, Davenport, all of them county, they had gaps in the old system.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think one is that one complaint that I had received is that the police department here in Davenport, the officers could not talk out of the report by anyone. And now they can. It's just the antenna's closer, so when you put new systems, their antennas are based in different areas and stuff like that. But every place that I've been into, I've been in areas this is probably about the smallest coverage area that I've ever worked at. I've been in areas that are 1,256 square miles, and no matter how much money you sink into them, you're still going to have some problematic areas that have to be dealt with just like this.
I'd like to move that we approve the purchase of the bi-directional radio amplifier equipment from Raycom Corporation in the amount of $17,843.40. Because that is for the area of Davenport you're talking
Yes,
about,
sir.
our police officers are having some.
Yes, correct.
Second motion.
it's been moved and seconded to approve the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? Unanimously approved. Thank you, Brian. Director's update.
Okay, I'll start out with, I give you a write-up in regards to some questions that were posed in front of us at the last meeting where we didn't have a forum, and I do have a response. I indicated on a lot of these items, the questions that would follow what is 95% coverage mean and several other questions. So in this write-up, I talk about the 95% coverage, what it entails. Also talk about P.01 standards and what that indicates that if they step outside. A P.01 standard is if you can have one busy when you push the button. If there's a busy signal that they get, if they can't get through, you can only have one busy signal for every 100 calls on the busiest time frame and the busiest part of the day. And if you go to push it again a few milliseconds later, you'll have a signal strength. If they don't match that, they have to do something about that. They have to actually add more frequencies into it. And so Raycom's already looking at one area. Walcott was one where they were coming up to that maximum area. And so they've already put a request into the FCC to add more channels to that area. And so, yeah, they're held and bound by that. So anyways, we haven't been receiving complaints in regards to officers not being able to get through because the system was busy.
Could I ask, has Medic experienced any difficulties?
I have not received complaints. I talked to Paul Andorf, who is the local person there, and I think I've also talked to Linda on a couple occasions, and we haven't seen it.
The coverage is good.
No complaints coming in from Bettendorf Police or Fire at this point. We've had a few small system issues out in the county, but that's mainly in how radios choose the towers that they talk on, and some software things that Raycom is presently working through.
We actually initially had some issues on Middle Road in Bettendorf, and when the radios were first deployed, but those have all been resolved. And look, there is typically a problem area for any system, as well as that area in Buffalo, for just tough areas. So.
Okay.
And so further in this write-up, I also talk about the proving of the system that takes place. Raycom's been fairly busy, and rightfully so, because after getting these systems online, they've poured about 10 or 15 other people into the SECC building trying to get all the central electronics banked up and tuning the system and working things. So they have been extremely busy, but they have received the equipment that actually puts a GPS up on top of a vehicle with radio sensing equipment, and then they drive the grids throughout the entire county. And then that receives all of the information. Then they come and download that into that computer software program, and then that shows them where the coverage areas are. And that proves whether there's the 95% or not. In my experience, those are pretty accurate, the ones up front, but this is just a way to prove it. I've also talked to Raycom, the owner of Raycom, and if we do not have the 95% coverage, and let's say the Hillendale area falls outside of that, they have already indicated that they will reimburse SECC for that. I also indicated that in the letter. And so, like I say, we're going through that. That's pretty much what that letter indicates. In other items, we have presently got Medic EMS dispatching into the operation. That went fairly smooth. I think Linda, you may agree on that. Linda's people worked extremely hard. Paul Andorf there, I think, was living there for a while.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And the morning that we turned everything over, there was relatively small issues. The phone systems, the radio systems, the computer infrastructure were pretty seamless. We had a lot of support personnel from Raycom, from Quest. We had Scott County IT out there. We had facilities and support. This is all taking place at 3 a.m. in the morning. The transition went very smooth. The next one that we pulled in was Bettendorf last week. I think it's been a week ago now. And that went relatively smooth. They were the first ones to go on the new CAD RMS system. Just like the radio system, there's a few items that they're working over. Some of the state NCIC records checks, they're having a few small issues with that, but that's all being worked over by New World Systems. And that went fairly smooth as well. This next Tuesday, we're pulling in Scott County into the new operation, and we anticipate with the radio systems and computer systems and everything that's been proven that that'll be a fairly smooth transition. Sheriff's Department's a little bit different because they serve a lot more different entities, so they have a lot more different functions going on. So those will be a lot of that we'll be looking at, making sure that they're all squared away. So consolidation's going well. We're getting geared up for the Davenport consolidation on May 3rd as well. We also have scheduled, I believe you guys have heard already, the ribbon cutting for May 19th for the SCCC building at 10 a.m. This week also is National Telecommunicator Week, and also one last thing that we've been working with. One of the more difficult things that we've been working on is we've been trying to get cable services up into the new building for the EOC to be able to get the national news and weather in case of large events and stuff like that. And over about the last year and a half, we've been working with MediaCom. It's been a fairly big disappointment because they've been resistant to everything that we've been trying to do. Most agencies, or every agency I've been in, usually cable companies are happy to help out with those type of things, and Raycom's been very as if they want to charge like $10,000 to get into the system, and then they want to charge us about $850 a month to be able to do that. So at this point, we're looking for other alternatives. I know Dave Donovan could have spoken a little bit more about that, but I know he's been spearheading that here.
He had a conversation yesterday with MediaCom, and I think that they're going to talk at a higher corporate level about what the consolidated dispatch does for them. I asked them Dave to make sure they understood that's how they know they have down wires, and that's how they get those calls for their own service. So it would be behoove maybe to look at the dispatch center as a governmental unit. Because it's not the city of Davenport, they're not recognizing it as a governmental unit, so they want to treat us more like a business. So they're going to have a further conversation at their corporate on what really, what services they should provide and what charges they should charge.
So do they presently serve the Davenport, the present Davenport discharge dispatch center as a government entity?
Yes.
And they fail to recognize the consolidation of the government entities? To me, this is so serious that I think the communities would come back to MediaCom and reconsider the deployment of MediaCom as the sole cable provider to the area.
Well, we come really close to saying exactly that.
Yeah.
Right now, we just said we think that you ought to really think about the business that we're in, and let's discuss further a nominal charge. So they are considering.
I would welcome a board conversation with their people, because I don't think any of the communities would remain favorable to them if they take this position. I don't mean to speak for the mayors, but I can speak for the medical centers. We would not continue to regard them as a community partner with this kind of florid disregard for an improvement to the system. So I think we take that at the very highest level. I would amplify this up. I mean, I know this board would be very happy to speak to their.
Well, we appreciate it. We'll use that leverage and see what we can do.
Yeah, that can't stand.
I believe the unfortunate part is we're not surprised.
Yeah.
Do you want me to order up a DDA for that?
Well, my MediaCom isn't working today at home either, and they told me 48 hours or so after I took forever to get in. They said, if you have a problem, don't go in that way. Go to billing as if you have a billing problem, and then tell us that your cable isn't working, because then you'll get a live voice faster. I thought, oh my gosh, thinking at work here what we're dealing with MediaCom, and that was what I got on the lady on the phone this morning, and I heard it now.
Do we have
a picture
options?
together?
Well, Dave Donovan is looking at satellite providers at this point. The only other option would just be a regular antenna, but you wouldn't get national news for like the EOC of large-scale events.
We're looking at the Dish Network.
We'd have to go to a Dish Network, but it would be unfortunate not to have
Right.
the cable access.
Right.
The satellite has its own problems.
Yeah.
Right.
On balance, I think cable would be more reliable. But it's the failure to recognize this as a consolidated EMS and government service that is intolerable. And I refuse to allow them to take this at some middle management level and try and write it off. I think we have much more market power with them than that.
It seems to me it's a front page story.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, let's tell them that. I mean, we've kind of gotten to the second level where we're serious about it. So we haven't quite got where we want to be.
Okay. Well, you have our
Thank you. Blessing.
enthusiastic endorsement.
We've had complaints about MediaCom. There's a new housing addition out here, Buckhorn Street, just off River Drive, out toward just this side of 280. Whole bunch of homes out there, and they can't get internet connection through MediaCom.
Right.
We looked into it a little bit, and we were told that, since the state took over regulating the cable industry, we have very little input, very little say, none actually, since that's been superseded by the Iowa Utilities Board. And perhaps that's where we're going to have to go for all these complaints, because we called, and same thing, we had to run around we can't get a straight answer from anyone, we can't get a hold of anyone, they won't call you back. MediaCom, and that's why these utility operations like MediaCom, in my judgment, we should have kept control or been able to keep control locally of those franchises.
Yeah.
Now, through their lobbyists, they pretty much do what they want around the state. And we're seeing the results, but I don't know what the answer is other than changing the law again, giving us the authority to regulate it.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, that's it. Been successful a couple of weeks with the consolidations, so we look forward to 2 more successful consolidations.
The next one is?
That will be Scott County next Tuesday.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, any other things? Any other information from the board? No? Our next meeting is May 5,
Right.
2011, 5:30 p.m. Okay. That's the motion.
So moved.
And
Second.
doesn't need a second draft. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.